you can like go back and hear the answers.
Yeah.
I'm gonna open these and then you guys can. One of them has chocolate chips and one of them does not. I don't remember which is which, but you guys can just choose whichever you prefer. Yeah, you're welcome. I love baking and making food, and so my favorite thing ever. So I think this one's chocolate chips and this one's not. I've got better knives. Depending on how many people show up, you might have to share knives, which is I think fun. Yeah. Okay. What's wrong? Okay, so since Alexis has to leave, let's just get started. I'm gonna just put this like right here. You guys are gonna get like to be on the video the whole time. I wish I was but there you go. Okay, so Sam, did you want to? I had some questions. You can go ahead and start.
So just so it's number 64, and it's about neural pruning, and I kind of understand that. So it talks about like in puberty, your brain like disconnects like the things that you don't do anymore. But like the question is talking about like how it affects our abilities in certain actions, and I couldn't really find anything in the textbook about that, so I don't know if it wanted me to like jump to the conclusion of when you don't do something you lose it. Is that kind of what the question is?
Totally.
Okay.
So basically with pruning, you're like right on, right? So you've got these neural connections that if like when you're a child, you like, for example, practice the piano, right? But then like say you stop like you've only taken like 4 piano lessons and you're like, we're really good at your scales, but then like years later, right, you hit puberty, you go through pruning, you're not gonna remember how to do those. Because your brain, like basically what you don't use, you lose. Same kind of thing with the language. Although, and I think this is another like test question, like if you come back to it later, it like is a little bit easier to learn, especially if it's something that you've like worked into your.
It's easier than like starting completely.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Riding bike. Okay, going back to riding bike.
I understood what the concept was, and just our abilities in certain actions. I didn't find anything in the textbook about that. Okay, and then just my only other question was 66, identify the main contributions of Piaget. And he created like the 4 stages of learning through the kids. So is that just what that question is asking, or is it like what contributed to Piaget?
Yeah, no. So it's basically what did Piaget contribute to psychology? So you're right. His contribution was the 4 stages of development, not necessarily learning, but his were like development.
Yeah.
And specifically like your cognitive development, which is another word.
Okay.
So yeah.
For that one, I wrote that he believed that people construct their understanding of the world while interacting with it. Is that like not right?
That's a little bit more in depth than you need to know. It's correct.
Okay, cool.
It is correct, but like basically you just need to know generally. Piaget was about like cognitive development.
Okay.
With children, like the 4 stages of child cognitive development.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless there's another question about Piaget, but I don't think so. I think there's just the one.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
I also had another. I kind of have a lot of questions, so.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Sorry. So for 79, it says, what are the feelings and behaviors that are associated with midlife transition to early whatever?
Oh, I think this is one that I was definitely going to go over.
I just didn't really know what to put for it.
Okay, yeah. So basically, this question is like trying to hit at a very specific thing. So let me just. I wish I was like, I'm going to be recording here. I wanted to have this on. Hey, welcome, TJ. Okay, wait, remind me, what was it, 79?
Yes.
Okay. You also identify feelings and behaviors that are not associated with midlife transition between early and middle adulthood. Okay, so do you remember, I have this in my slideshow, I think, so we can come back to it, but do you remember, basically, there is a scientist. Give me 1 second. Not Maslow, who is it? Okay, so there, I'm gonna pull up my. Erickson, it was Erickson. So basically, okay, let me just show you guys this, and this will be on the. So let me just share my screen. Oh, a lot of things. Okay, so, okay, so right here, it's kind of small, so you guys can like either scrunch in or whatever, but you've got these stages of like development, right? So basically Erickson's idea was that in infancy, you're like what you're trying to figure out is basically who you can trust and mistrust, right? And then like once you get to early childhood, you're like autonomy and shame and doubt, right? So basically this question is asking about that.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's saying like, you've got your like, what was it, early and middle adulthood. So it's basically saying you've got your like young adulthood and then middle adulthood. So just trying to like learn those. And this will be, again, like I'm gonna post this so you can come back to it. But
Okay.
basically right here, you've got your intimacy versus isolation and you've got your generativity versus stagnation. So remember those.
So just like remember the intimacy versus isolation and then the other one.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, generativity versus stagnation. So basically that's like if you're like generating positivity versus like what you're contributing basically.
Okay.
Yeah, versus like not going anywhere.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just didn't know what to put for that. Okay, wait, does anyone have any other questions or?
I have a question.
Wait,
Okay,
for-
cool.
Sorry, for those, for that one, do we only need to know those two,
There's another
stages?
question. So no. You need, okay. So there's a question, that the study guide says, like, no Erickson stages.
Okay.
And so basically just know all of them. I've started some important ones, so make sure your muscles are sorry. Yes. Okay. So yeah, and those ones are adolescents and adulthood. Just there you go.
My question is about attachment formation in nature and nurture, because there's a lot about nature and nurture, but I just didn't know like how that relates to attachment.
Okay, what question is it? Do you remember?
Number 50.
There are all of these. 50 was understand how attachment formation can be affected by nature and nurture. How can I do this? 1 second.
That's a lot of papers.
Yeah, this is, you guys are gonna have fun. Okay,
Oh, is that, do you have our test right now?
yeah, I'm just
Oh,
looking at the
oh.
test.
Awesome.
So this is fun. And the study guide, so I've got both, so it's bigger
Okay.
because of both. Okay, so basically, what is attachment formation? Do you know what that is, like generally?
Is it just like I don't know exactly.
That's okay.
But is it just like kids attached to their parents? Like
Totally.
the people they
Yeah, so basically, if you remember in Erickson's stages right here, children are trying to figure out who they can trust and mistrust, right? So a healthy child will form healthy attachments, right?
Yeah.
So then through nature or nurture, like, so if you remember with epigenetics, you've got your like your nurture, how you're raised, or like the experiences that you have can affect the expression of your genes, right? Which genes turn on, which genes turn off.
Yeah.
So basically, if you like through nurture are not able to trust your parents through whatever experiences, right? Then that can affect your nature, meaning you can form insecure attachments, right? So like generally we tend to like form secure attachments, but if we're like nature has made it so that, or nurture, I'm so sorry, experiences have made it so that we don't form these secure attachments.
So like commitment issues.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it manifests in it specifically manifests in children by like not trusting your parents, or like when your parents leave, you like are unconsolable, or you don't even care.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So while we're on that real quick, so question 70 was about the monkeys. It's review the finding of the famous experiment with infant monkeys.
Mhm.
And I just kind of said, like, the monkeys were given, well, they were separated from their mother and they made attachments to something soft rather than hard.
Mhm.
Is that just kind of like all we need to know there?
Essentially, yeah. Remember which question?
70.
Funny. Basically, if I remember correctly when I was looking over this, yeah, yep, that's basically what you need to know for that. It's basically like in those monkeys searching for like going to the parent with carpet on her, like that means that monkeys in their attachment with their mothers are looking for what?
Something soft, the soothed by comfort contact.
So it's contact. Yeah. So rather than like feeding, that just showed that like instead of like food being the thing that monkeys like, or even children just attach to, it's the contact, the body contact. Perfect. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Nailed it.
For question 106,
Mhm.
I just didn't know, and I just couldn't find anything in the textbook. Yeah.
106, let me see that question. Okay, do you remember there was a day, and it just depends. So there was a video that we watched in class that talked
Okay.
about like developing false memories. And do you remember the study that they did of like the hot air balloons where they like photoshopped
Oh,
their like
that
person's
sounds-
picture into a hot air balloon, and then they were like, "Do you remember this?" And then over the
Yeah.
course of the week, the study participant was like, "No, I don't remember that experience." And then at the very end of the week, they were like, "Yeah, and I remember the boardwalk, and I remember like the green grass, and I remember floating, even though they had never been in a hot air balloon."
Oh,
So, basically, yeah,
just like know what that is. the
yeah.
hot
So
air.
basically, just
Okay.
remember that, like, just remember that. So the question is saying, generally for the construction of false memories, specifically the ability to differentiate between false and real memory. So yeah, basically remember that study and how like
Okay.
the study participant at the beginning of the week was like, no, that didn't happen. And by the end of the week, they thought it was like completely real. They would have like sworn.
Okay.
That's basically just memory construction, right?
Is there any way on our own to distinguish
Yeah.
what memories are real
Did that
and fake?
help? Does that answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
If you use the index, you can like just like search for like.
Oh, I just
Yeah, the text
not.
is kind of hard to remember.
I'm just not like a techie person, so I didn't know how to do
I know that's what I
that.
was like trying to.
Okay, wait. Index. What's
Well, I can just like show you real quick. So if you're just on, like here, where I'll just go to the textbook.
You guys hear me?
Hey, I was just texting you. Come on in.
So like this page, right?
yeah?
If you just go down to view all, that was on the bottom of the page. Sorry, that was fast. If you just scroll down,
Mhm,
you have like the cover page. This is the actual textbook.
mhm.
So you just can click and you can go all the way to subject index. And then just control F.
Oh, okay,
And you can just look up like
Yeah.
any part of your question.
okay.
Like, because I just did like false memories. 317 through 321.
That would have been
I know,
so
so
nuts
it's
that I
And
was
then
making
doesn't it
this.
link to it so you can like click on the page number and it'll take you right to that page.
Wow.
That's so helpful.
Yeah.
I literally,
Yeah,
I sounded so
it's-
heavy.
Yeah.
I wish I had known that day, so I was like, I'm just gonna Google this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Thomas, everything we've already gone through is recorded, so you can access that afterward. No, yeah, sorry. Also, I will say, just side note, like, you can access all of the TA's study group sessions. So like, there are other questions that other students have had. Sarah specifically is very helpful. I haven't watched any of the other ones, but hers is really helpful too. So, okay. Did you have any other questions?
Oh, I still had some, but
Yeah, for
I
sure,
feel
go
like
for
I'm
it.
asking so many
Do you want to do
questions.
yours since you're,
No, it's
since you're
okay.
leaving?
You can go.
Oh wait, no, you can do it.
Okay,
We're at
I
there's
just-
about 8 minutes. Yeah, you go.
okay. My questions are just like, are there ways to remember like things that happen in your brain? Like we had that whole like part where we have the receptors and the neurotransmitters and everything, and I'm just like, that's just like so much to remember. Do you have like any helpful hints on how to remember
Yes.
stuff that goes in the head?
So yes, I do. I've made this
Okay.
whole slide here that's going to be very helpful for you. I'm just going to leave it here so that like when you go back and access the thing, it's just going to be right there.
Will this like
That's all I
PowerPoint
need to know.
be on like
Technically, no. Like I'm not going to post my PowerPoint, but you
Okay.
can like go back and like rewatch the review session and just pause it here.
okay,
if that makes
okay,
sense.
yeah.
So yeah, this is like yeah.
Okay.
So these are like brain structures that you're gonna need to know. I just went through this like the study guide and like wrote out which ones are in the study guide that you needed to know, and then just some helpful little like tidbits about what they do next to them to kind of help your help your studying go a little bit faster. I like Quizlet. Like I would just put these like all of these in the Quizlet and just be like,
Guys are gonna come back and listen to this.
There you go.
Okay,
And
and one more question.
you'll hear my voice. and
So
it's
number
funny.
54, it says which is larger, person-to-person differences within a cultural group or differences among groups? Is it just
It's just find which one of those is bigger. So basically it's asking, right? So basically, all of us are pretty much in the same culture group, right? We're I'm pretty sure all members of the church, like we pretty much were raised pretty similarly, I'm guessing. We're here in the same school, right? Taking the same class. So we're gonna be all pretty similar, right?
Yeah.
So like differences between us or differences between like say the United States versus a different group, or like whites versus like African Americans, which is greater. Is what that's asking.
okay?
And then in the textbook, it's like pretty straightforward. So I would just like
Okay,
search that one. Yeah. Which question was that?
54.
What was it?
54. Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
Basically, you
sounds
just
good.
literally have to know which one is
Okay.
greater. Okay. And basically, the question is asking because oftentimes we think like, oh, we as like an in group are so much different than that other out group, right? So like, since I'm white, that person that's black is going to be so different than me, or like, since I'm a female, that person that's a male is going to be so different than me. Come on in, please. So you can see there's one here or here. But basically this question is just getting at like, most of the time, like person to person, we're more different than like group to group. Does that make sense? So like, it's kind of like combating like racism.
That makes sense.
Yep, there you go.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Did you have any other ones?
I think that's everything I have. Thank you.
Okay. And Jackson, everything that I'm recording this, so like whatever you missed, you can just go.
Oh, cool.
You just
Sweet.
go back
That's
and
awesome. Yeah, that'd be great.
Did you have more?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it, please.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So on number 134, it says, what's the relationship, or I said like, what's the relationship between a woman's expression of emotion and personal disposition? Do we just have to know like how a woman expresses emotion and how it's different than how a man does? Or is it just like, what is it in general?
What was that?
134.
Questions. Okay, review the relationship between women's expressions of emotion and personal. Okay, so it's just saying, understand how women express their emotions relating to personal dispositions, or like how women pick up on emotions from other people based on personal dispositions. So basically, oh no, that's not even true. Okay, so okay, so what this is asking, when women express their emotions, it's received differently than when men express their emotions, right?
Oh, bossy versus leader.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes. So it's just
okay,
saying,
okay.
yeah, right? I'm like,
I remember
that
that.
question here is
Yeah,
not.
you were just saying
It was
that.
just like worded where I
It's
just.
It's totally worded weirdly. And this one is basically, this question, the way it's written is basically like getting at the test question in like a weird sort of way that if you have the test question, it makes sense, but if you don't.
Okay.
So basically, yes, basically it's saying like when women express their emotions, it is perceived as that personal disposition. Like basically, oh, she's expressing her emotions, she's just an emotional person. Versus when men express their emotions, they're like, oh man, he must be having a rough day.
Yeah.
Or like
Okay.
you don't tend to think that a man is like an emotional person just because our culture doesn't think that.
Okay.
Basically, that's what that's asking, is like women are perceived, when they express emotions, are perceived as it's perceived as a personal disposition. Yeah, it's like that is their
okay.
person.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that one because I'm like,
Yeah.
yes,
Are we just going around like asking questions? Is
Yeah.
this like a free for all type thing?
totally.
I didn't know what gestalt is. Gestalt.
Yes. Okay.
Psychology or whatever.
So that is a German word, which means like the sum. Oh, thank you. I'm like just going off the memory. The sum of the sum is greater than, or the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's what Gestalt psychology means, right? So for example, zucchini bread, right? You look at that and you're like, that is a bread, right? That's zucchini bread. It's a dessert or a snack, or I don't even know what it is. It's bread, right? But you don't look at that and be like, oh, that is eggs and flour and zucchini and sugar and whatever. You don't look at that and be like, oh, I see all of the parts. And if you were to eat just flour or just sugar or like whatever, you wouldn't be like, oh, this is zucchini bread. Like, and you wouldn't even enjoy it probably because flour is disgusting. But like when you eat the bread, it's like better than just all of its parts.
Okay, so is that like kind of like relating like teamwork or something? Like we're all
Basically,
better
I think what
together,
it's
or-
talking about, if I remember correctly, is like a lot of people look at the brain or like psychology as neural networks, or like the psychology is just your behavior. But this is saying that we as people, like our psychology is more than just like our brain or our neuro whatever that's happening or whatever. It's just saying we are a combination of like our experience and our biology and our social whatever. So basically that's our biopsychosocial. Do you remember that, how we kept coming back to like our biopsychosocial psychology basically? It all plays a factor, and so we are much more than just each thing individually. Does that make sense? Yeah. Let me just make sure that I answered that, and then that will help you with the test. Remember the question?
It's question 87.
87. Almost there. Oops. Okay. Okay. So now you have a lot more information than we need. Yes. Yep.
Someone just
Basically-
asked, can someone unmute Rose's speakers?
Have I been muted this whole time?
Oh,
That makes me so sad.
I've just been laughing
Not
this
a
entire
mute.
time.
Probably read most of my lips.
They might just
I'm not sure.
Someone just wrote that on the Google sheet.
Oh, on the Google sheet.
Yeah,
That's funny.
Oh, that sucks.
I'm imagining.
That's funny.
Yeah.
But then you can't like actually get any of it if you watch it again. That makes me so sad.
Well, you'll
And
hear
I don't
me.
even know how to stop it.
You are unmuted. It's that your speakers are muted.
I just feel like you would do that. That's so funny.
It says that it's playing.
Hey,
Hey TJ, can you hear me now?
Talk to him.
I can still hear you. You can't hear me.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay, there we go.
That's great. I don't know what I did. I just
Oh,
moved
you can
something.
hear us now?
But you can hear
The
us.
whole recording is fine. All you'll hear is me talking and nobody responding. But I've been laughing this entire time.
No. I literally, okay, well, I'm sorry that we couldn't hear you, but also I had a mini heart attack. Woo, okay, good. But also, welcome to our group.
Thank you.
Okay, basically,
Bread is really good.
Yeah.
It's really good.
it is gluten free.
That explains why the texture is good.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's not bad. It's
But it
just
tastes
like-
good.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
incredible.
good.
Like, but it's just, oh, there's something. Oh, that's
Yeah,
really
it's kind of like the after texture is a little bit gritty.
good. But like, yeah, I think I actually like it that way.
Okay, great. Okay, so to finish with the Gestalt question, basically a Gestalt is a sum of things. So basically a grouping or like a
Perceptual organization, says Google.
there you go. It's like a way of grouping things. So for example, our psychology or our yeah.
Group versus.
Yes. Okay, TJ, did you have, now that we like actually can hear you, do you have questions?
No, I was just making a comment on something else, but it's already passed now, so we're good.
Bring us back. Okay, awesome. Okay, were there more? Do you guys have more questions?
I have a question on number 121. I wrote like which behaviors contribute to metabolism and settling points.
Do you remember what a settling point is? Or what metabolism is?
Like metabolism is like how fast you process food,
Mhm.
but I don't know what a settling point is.
Does anyone want to, does anyone?
I'll take a shot at it. It's the idea that our weight is kind of like, our body weight has a settling point that it like naturally wants to be at. So if you diet or you let's say you lose a lot of weight and then eventually if you get off your diet, you'll come back to your settling point.
Okay.
It's kind of like your baseline.
Okay.
Perfect, yeah. So basically this question is asking what can influence our metabolism rate, so the rate at which we like use our energy or food energy, right? Or
Okay.
and what things change our settling point. So basically you've got your biology, which is your metabolism and settling point. Those are just like genetically dispositioned, right?
Mhm.
And then there are different like activities that you can do to change those. For example, exercise and sleeping, for example,
Okay.
random example, could change or affect your metabolism and settling point, right? So what is a good metabolism? Is it high or low?
It's hot.
High. So if you're like doing good things, it's gonna increase your metabolism, right?
Okay.
If what is like, do we tend to think a higher settling point is better or a lower settling point is better?
Hopefully somewhere in the middle.
Low.
Hopefully somewhere in the middle, but low, right? A lot of people. You said low. Did you say dang it?
Well, you said Thomas was right.
Oh no, I said both of you guys are right. Right. So ultimately, right, when we're trying to be healthy or lose weight, we want to bring our settling point down by being like, oh, I want my natural settling point to be lower so that I'm skinnier or whatever, and then also your metabolism to be higher. So good habits like exercising and getting enough sleep are gonna help your metabolism by bringing it up, right? And then bring yourself.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. All right. What other questions do you guys have for me?
So there's a question that I also just couldn't find the answer to about how early depth perception appears in infants. Is that like
Okay.
like referring to like when they like do peekaboo or something like that, or
Kind of. Give me the question number.
is 88 right?
Recall how early depth perception appears in infants. So basically, oh yeah. Okay, so do you remember the depth perception for infants? We watched a video about it with like, oh, did we? Maybe that was my other class. Oh shoot. Okay, so the textbook talked about infants coming up to like a ledge, right? I don't know if you remember that, but there was like a glass table with like a ledge underneath it, so the infants could crawl over safely, but it looked like they would fall if they moved over it.
Oh,
Do you remember that?
So they didn't go over it.
So basically the question is asking, do infants have depth perception or not? If they do, then they would be hesitant to crawl over it. If they don't, then they would just be like, oh, great, and crawl to their moms on the other side. Because their mom was always encouraging on the other side, like, come on, come on, come on, right? And so then if the baby doesn't go over it, then they were. And I think that, let's see.
Which chapter is that in?
I don't have a chapter number on my
Page 230.
Chapter, yeah, it's just what exactly what Rose said. They placed 6th to 14th month on the edge of the cliff. Most infants refused to do so, indicating that they could perceive death.
There you go.
So it's basically the same as us.
Right.
Yeah, I thought it was like different because it was like,
It's like
what
asking
is
about
like in
infants.
infants? It's the same.
Yeah, basically just remember that study. Just remember that thing.
They
and
won't
not-
crawl, and they go on to say like it was a evolutionary thing that we picked up as humans.
I don't think you don't need to listen to extra information, but yeah. Just remember that study and that infants are similar to adults. in that. Harry, did you have any questions? Want to like put you on the spot? I was like, I don't want to skip over you if you do.
Can we go over question 100? Like, what do we need to know about the study of little Albert?
Okay, let me make sure that I tell you all that important information. Okay, this one is pretty straightforward. Basically, do you guys remember the study of little Albert? Remember what that was?
Not really.
Okay, that's okay. So little Albert was basically just this little boy, just like an infant. And the experimenters would they basically classically conditioned him to be scared of a rat, right? They would like have this white furry rat be there, and then they would like ring a really loud bell behind him. And so then he would like see the rat and be like startled from this bell. And so then eventually he wouldn't even have to be startled by the bell. He would just see the rat and start crying. And then it got to the point where like, even if they introduced like a rabbit, like a white rabbit or like Santa Claus's beard, like little Albert was afraid of like just white furry things. Not because and he wasn't afraid of the rat before, they just classically conditioned him to be afraid.
Okay, so it's just like classical conditioning.
Perfect, yep. That's basically Watson. Like Watson and Pavlov. Pavlov first with the dogs, right? It's like salivating. And you do need to know about that. Like you do need to know what, like in classical conditioning, what's the conditioned, what's the unconditioned responses and stimuli.
Okay.
If you want, we can go over that. If you guys are feeling confident, we can just.
Is that the one with like the dog and then the bell?
Mhm. Do you want to go over it?
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So basically,
It's a question of me too if anyone's looking for it.
So conditioned response, unconditioned response, unconditioned stimulus, and conditioned stimulus.
Okay, so. Okay, so what I think of it is conditioning is the training, right? If you're being conditioned to do something, you're being trained to do something, right? So a conditioned response is going to be the response that you're trained to do. Unconditioned means it's the natural thing, okay? So basically you have your unconditioned stimulus and your unconditioned response. For example, in the
Food
dogs, food and salivating, yep. Dogs naturally will salivate with food, right? But then they started introducing the food with a bell. And so the conditioned stimulus is the bell and the conditioned response is still the salivating, right? So basically with classical conditioning, the conditioned response, the conditioned and unconditioned responses are going to be the same,
But to different stimuli.
but to different stimuli.
Perfect.
So basically whichever stimuli they're using, that's the response that you need to know.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Can you explain conditioned stimulus again?
Yeah, so the conditioned stimulus is the thing, it's also called a neutral stimulus.
Oh, okay.
So basically it's a stimulus that, like, for example, if a dog just heard a bell, that wouldn't cause like them to salivate at all because it's just a bell. But these dogs that have been trained or like conditioned, basically the bell is the conditioned stimulus because
Okay.
they're conditioned to salivate to it
Okay.
with the food. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me make sure that we covered everything that you need to know for that one. It was 100, right?
So it's
92.
Okay. Um. Need to. Yeah. So just remember, the responses are the same, but depending on what the stimulus is, will affect whether it's the conditioned or unconditioned response.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I have one more like that. It's a combo. It's on 75 and 76.
Okay.
So it's the researcher Hates,
Eight, I think.
on moral action. And so, well, I answered like 76 with my answer to 75. So like they found that like a lot of like moral reasoning, like we pretend like we have this like moral reasoning in our brain, but like most of the time we make those split-second decisions. Do I need to know much more? Because there's 2 questions on it. Because like Hate's research was that people like make that decision like super quickly.
Yeah.
And then the next question is, how do gut level intuitions impact our moral judgments? And
It's right. So you're correct. Both of those questions are pretty much answered the same.
okay.
So you're, it's basically when you're introduced to a situation that you'd have to make a moral judgment. Oftentimes it's just unconscious, like you just make that decision. Same thing with gut, like it's your gut reaction.
Okay.
So yeah, same answer for both of those study guide questions. Yeah, correct. Any other questions?
Well, we can turn it over to you. If you said you wrote down some hard ones.
Yeah, I've got some that we can review. I'm gonna share my screen again.
I have a question
Oh, yeah.
about, there's a lot of different like theories about development. And just lists of traits and developmental stages.
Mhm.
How firmly do we need to know those stages and their associated researcher?
I would say with Erickson, we kind of already went over his. With Erickson, I would know that. And I kind of gave you a few helps on that one. And then Maslow's hierarchies, I would know as well.
Okay.
I think other than that, it's not really going to ask very specifically, like. Oh, and then Piaget. We talked about Piaget.
Okay, so those 3.
This question didn't seem well.
But Piaget was like super
it was pretty
general. Yeah, know that
just
he
know
was
that he
cognitive.
had the cognitive stages.
Yeah.
At least that's what the study guide made it seem like.
Yeah. But then as far as like Erickson goes, know what his were. Maslow's, know what his were. And I'm pretty sure that's all.
Where's Maslow's on this study guide?
111.
111.
Did you?
Oh yeah, I did 5 a day for like a month.
Wow.
Girl.
I'm dedicated.
It's like out in your study group.
Wait, did you like-
No, I can share it with you guys if you want. It's like probably not right, but like I can share it with you guys if you want.
That's awesome.
Oh my goodness. Bless your soul.
Yeah, I'll put it in our Google Doc.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. You should put like a link to it in the Google Doc.
Yeah, I'll try. I don't really know.
That sounds great.
I'll try to do it.
Okay. Why did it go so big? I don't know how to do that. Stop.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's like probably like not that good. So yeah.
With that.
Okay, so we're gonna go through a few and then I'm gonna draw some stuff on the board for you guys. So number 4, I thought that, okay, did someone answer that one already? What is overconfidence? Like, what's the definition of it?
Someone wrote overestimating one's ability or knowledge.
Yeah, so what is the danger of that?
Rash decision making and get yourself into trouble.
Yeah.
Like considering that you're wrong and
Mhm.
not taking everything in.
Totally, yes. So if you think back to critical thinking, do you remember the 3 ingredients to critical thinking?
Curiosity, humility, and
Just skepticism. Yeah.
thank you. That's the one I can never remember.
Yeah. So overconfidence basically is the opposite of humility, right? So basically it impairs your ability to think critically because you're, remember that. Okay, this one, misinformation. 7 and 8 both talk about misinformation. So basically 7 talks about repetition and 8 talks about identity. So what would be an example of repetition influencing your misinformation? Does that make sense?
Oh,
so-
whereas someone sorry, go ahead.
No, you go for it.
Just say someone like keeps saying something to you and then you just like eventually believe it.
Or a lot of people say something, right? For example, I put on here Pete Davidson and Kim Kardashian, like opposites attract. Everybody says opposites attract, and so like everyone believes it, but like actually that's not even true. Like marriages are more happy when there's actually a lot of common ground, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so repetition is like a common, or like a thing that people think is common knowledge or like a saying, basically. Does that make sense? That specifically is not on the test, like opposites attract, but just yes. That's how repetition
It
is.
must be hard knowing like the answer to the final
Not
question.
saying
No, I really seriously, I'm like, I'm giving all these answers. Okay. Okay, and then group identity. Group identity leads to misinformation because oftentimes we look for people who share our beliefs, right? So like if I have an idea or like a belief, then I tend to search out a group that shares that belief. So for example, if I'm like a Republican and I'm like join a I don't even know what I'm going with that.
NRA.
Sure. Right, like okay, for example, my family, especially my dad and my brothers are very like sounding chamber, right? Like literally I go home and they're like talking about politics and they're like this and then like yeah and this and they're like in this heated argument and I'm like, you guys are not even arguing, you're like on the same page and you're just mad at other people, right? That's like group identity where you're like, yeah, we really believe this all ourselves. And so oftentimes like that group, if they say something, you're gonna believe that even if it's not true, right? Okay.
Propaganda.
Essentially,
Like,
yeah.
what I do.
Yeah, but you seek it out, right? You're seeking out the propaganda that you want to be a part of. Okay. Okay, this one, correlation. How are you guys on your stats? Super great.
Yeah.
Good.
Well,
Hey TJ, can you see the slideshow? Just gotta make sure. Okay, perfect. Okay. Correlation, basically, I don't know, it's super, super small and I'm really sorry, but basically looks like this. So you've got like your plots and you're like, if, for example, this is talking about cars. So like your car's mileage goes up, right? Your car's value goes down. So like the more miles you have on your car, the less it is worth, right?
Yeah.
So basically we use correlation to try and say like, okay, if my car has this much mileage, how much would it be worth, right? And you can kind of use this general correlation plot to guess, right? A correlation coefficient basically is a number, and I think it goes from zero, like -1 to 0 to 1, right? So basically this is a negative correlation, meaning as one thing goes up, the other thing goes down, right? Positive correlation is as one thing goes up, the other one goes up. So you can be like, what would be an example of a positive correlation?
The more fruits you eat, the more energy you have.
Sure.
That's kind of a stretch.
But like
Water
sugar,
is
carbs.
outside, the more ice cream you eat. Oh yeah, that's.
There you go. There you go. The danger of that is saying, because it's hot outside.
Sorry.
That's like a very common one. Basically though, the danger of that is saying, oh, because it's hot, that causes us to eat more ice cream, right? It could be that ice cream sales go up because of something else.
New flavors announced at Baskin Robbins.
Boom, right? That doesn't affect how hot it is, but like how hot it is maybe affects both of them, or there could be a third factor.
Causation is hard to prove, but correlation.
Totally.
Like, just because there's correlation, there's not causation.
Yeah. How do you prove causation? Or
Independent
You
studies.
have to have a lot of different hypotheses and run it through a bunch of different testing before you can say that definitively this and these two things are caused by each other.
totally. Specifically, not just tests, but experiments where you're controlling every single variable, right? So experiments with random assignment and random sampling, right? Because you have to, in order to like see a causation, you have to have like a really representative group of the population that you're trying to study. So then it has to be random, right? And then you have to like literally control every variable in order to tell. So just observation is not, correlation is not causation necessarily, okay? And then you have your correlation coefficient, right? So basically a positive or negative correlation, which means then that it is statistically significant, right? So if there is a correlation, then there is a statistically significant thing, right? But you could have a big effect size or a small effect size. Does anyone know what an effect size is?
I'm sure that we know it, but we don't know how to say
Just
it.
like the amount that is affected by.
Yeah, so basically you can say,
Oh, is that like where the we talked about how genetically like a lot of our like part of our genes, like our personality is partially affected by like some certain percent of it is?
sort
Is that
of,
the same thing?
not,
Is it more
not
like-
quite, not quite.
Like when it's
Good guess.
hot, water parks sell more tickets, but when it's the weekend, water parks sell significantly more tickets.
Kind of, yes, yeah, kind of.
What's the question?
Should just
What's
explain it.
effect size? I'll just explain.
Size.
Effect size, yeah. So basically, you can have a statistically significant outcome, right? Saying that this and this are highly or correlated, right? But effect size could be small, even if they're like correlated, meaning it doesn't really matter, right? Or you can have like two things that are like correlated and the effect size is big, meaning it does matter. Just remember that. So basically, you could say, I want to give like a good example, but nothing's coming to my mind.
Like just
I'm so confused. What?
like early drug use makes your like brain not develop. Like if that's correlated, that's like a serious.
That would be a big effect size.
Yeah.
So like it has bigger impact in the real world.
On BuzzFeed, there's a bunch of like high correlation but very low effect size things. ice cream sold versus murders. Like there's a
There you go.
positive trend
So
between
So just
May
because
and
you can prove
July.
Like how
correlation doesn't mean
relevant it is.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
Okay, sorry that took so long for us to get.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I'm like trying to like steer you to this thing, but I'm like, I don't even have a good example for it, so that's not helpful. But yeah, basically, ice cream and murders, like maybe it's the heat.
Alright,
We learned in our textbook that like
Yeah.
warm weather increases aggressiveness.
and a bunch of
And-
things.
Yeah,
Also, it's allergy season and everyone's tired and sad because of daylight savings.
totally. Yeah.
Finals week.
Mm.
So it's possible that like suicide rates go up in the summer, which means ice cream causes suicide. Like also not true,
Okay.
right?
Wow.
Like, right? Like also, so that would be a low effect size.
Okay.
Does that make
okay,
sense?
That makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah, that makes
Okay.
we're good.
Yes.
Perfect. Remember that one. Okay, great. Brain structures. I already left this on here. There are like 9 or 10 different brain structures that you need to remember. I think these are all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Should be all of them.
Are they on like specific parts of the brain? Because these questions look more on the overall.
So this would be like, there's a question about the thalamus, right? There's a question about the limbic system. There's a question about the larger cortex.
So chemical.
So kind of basically go, yeah,
What they do.
just go through them what they do. I put in parentheses some really helpful hints. So just make a Quizlet or something and just learn those, okay? Erickson's stages, again, this one I gave you some stars to know, so know those. But basically Erickson's stages of development are that in each stage of development, rather than like very cut and dried, like when you're 3 years old, now you become interested in this. It's basically like when you're in your early childhood, you're worried about these things. And then when you start being worried about and focusing on these things, then now you're in your late childhood or adolescence or whatever. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So just remember his stages, learn them. There's a couple of okay. Bystander effect. Wait, did I do that one? Bystander effect is number 142 in your study guide. So please go back and read about this one. There's like a specific example about it that's gonna be really helpful if you remember the example in the textbook. I don't remember the girl's name right now. 42, yeah, what is bystander effect? So remember, whoever has that one on the study guide, like whoever's in charge of that one, make sure that you put in like the example that they used to talk about the bystander effect. Okay, basically it was like a murder case and there was a girl and people didn't help and yeah.
Wait, so you need to know the specifics, not just like.
The fake emergency or no?
No, I'm trying to remember her name.
She was
I
like
can't remember her
screaming
name.
out in an alley and then.
Yeah, and people like
heard
opened their
her,
windows.
but-
Yeah, and the guy came and like stabbed her and then left because people opened their windows and came back and
And she
like
was
killed
like
her and then
sitting
raped her.
there
Yeah,
and just like,
just in this alleyway that like people were like their houses were there, and just because everybody thought that,
Somebody else.
Someone else would
Yeah.
like help.
remember her name. I don't remember it. Look
You
up
have
her
to
name and put
remember
it
her
in.
name.
Just maybe.
okay.
I don't know,
alright.
just remember it.
Throwing that out.
Okay, then a couple more things. I know we have a few minutes. If you need to go, you can. I'm gonna just draw it on the board. So I'm just gonna set this right here. So that, like,
Catherine Susan Genevieve.
Actually.
Is it that?
I think so. I hope that this actually
Was
works. Okay.
This
Okay, I'm gonna go quickly through these. I'm not gonna do the year because Sarah goes through that one in hers. So go into Sarah's and you can find that one. Basically, oh. Yeah, it's fine. I don't know what we're gonna do.
That's all right.
Okay.
We just need to go over the nerves and the eye. I'll just go really quickly, okay? You've got the eye. This is the nerve, right? You've got this thing right here. And then the pupil right here, this is the side of the eye, right? You've got the lens, and you've got the retina. Retina here. This thing is cornea. So notice, okay, the light comes in the cornea, through the pupil, through the lens, which reflects it, lens. which reflects it onto the retina, which then sends it to your, okay? That makes
Okay.
sense?
Yes.
Okay, Courtney, yeah.
Or the lens, right?
Chemistry.
I would take a picture of it.
It's really cool, yeah, go for it.
upside down.
That's true, if it comes in here, I should have drawn the arrow over here, but that's whatever.
There's
Okay.
a molecule.
Yeah.
that when it gets to its excited
Did you get that?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay,
and then
if
it
you wanna. submit it,
hits,
then-
it's by certain
Yeah,
frequencies of
throw it
light.
in this, and then,
changes.
yeah.
The
Absurd.
Google Doc.
Yeah.
Go team, just review the nerves, just remember you've got like the synapse, there's like reuptake that happens
Axon.
after axon did, right? You guys got this, you guys are gonna do great.
Alright.
Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Good luck, you guys. Good luck, TJ.
See you later.